So thank you for having me for your meeting. I want to talk a little bit about the MBS plugin, take your questions, and show you a few things in the plugin. So let's start. You may have downloaded the plugin. You may get a folder like this, where you find the Mac, the Windows, the Linux, the iOS plugin. And then you install the plugin. And then you may go into FileMaker, and you may
current TVs is something different. So when sometimes pushing some new section or new functionality into the
hello. Something happened?
No, we can hear you. Somebody else is speaking.
Okay. So you may open the preference folder and you see our preferences for the plugin, where you see all the little features we have for the Mac developers about syntax highlighting, variable check, and I want to show a few of those features if you like. So let's just create a database, a sample database from FileMaker, and go into the script workspace. And not sure if you notice, but this is a bigger font, because we have this little setting here where you can pick a custom font and a custom font size. So I can create a new script, and I can put in some steps. And the plugin has a couple of rules on how to color the script steps. So you may notice that the set variable without any variable is orange. But if I put in an assignment, it gets, in this case, purple, because there's a rule to say if the set variable has a variable name, it goes, well, purple, and otherwise orange. The perform script goes red unless you pick a script. Then it's blue, and here the conditions where you can just type something. We have blue. So when I click on the condition here, if you see that the other parts of the condition will turn blue. So we have there a light blue background to show you the other parts of the same condition, and I can nest that. So I can put another if there, and I can put a loop inside. There's a loop there. So if I click on the loop, it will show me that this exit loop belongs together, and this loop, this end loop, belongs to this loop. And same with the end if, and here if, else if, end if works wonderful. May be very useful for you to find yourself around. So then we have a variable check. So I can define a variable test. Everything is fine. Now I use the variable test somewhere. Let's say I make here some other assignment, and I type test with 2T on the end, and the plugin will show me an error. This variable name has not been defined anywhere. So I can fix that, and now the variable name is noticed by the plugin, and so the step is no longer red. Sometimes we have a few steps in FileMaker where the plugin may not know whether it's whether the target is a variable, a field, is an input or an output variable. And for that case, you may want to tell the plugin that this is a variable name. So if the plugin, oh, this works. I wanted to show you a case where it didn't work. So let's say here, $file. So the plugin tells you that $file is not found. Also it's a target here, so it's an assignment. And for that case, you can do declare the plugin. It's a variable, and then the plugin will see, okay, that's a valid name. I'm not sure, is any one of you using that to find misspelled variable names?
It looks like it's a very handy idea.
Yeah, by the way, if you can't read the text, you may notice that we have a plus button. So let's continue. If you want to copy a script and paste it to your favorite form site, you can just use our copy button here and go to a text editor. That's my text edit. On the other screen. Okay, and you can just paste it. The plugin will retain the colors and add a little comment here to tell you which script name from which file. If you have CMS, no, so if you have a CMS on your blog post and you need HTML, you can use the Option key and press the Copy Script Text button, and then you get this HTML representation with all the CSS to get, well, a similar text as HTML. Let me show the preview. So looks the same and maybe handy for pasting it somewhere in a blog post. So then we have here a little search feature. So let's say I'm looking for something for if, and you see all this color, these lines with an if turn into yellow.
Yeah.
This search, you can, there's multiple search words. So you can say if and else, and we find this line. And you can actually click between, let's say go, click through your scripts and see everywhere where the text is matching. Sometimes we have long scripts, so we may tell someone, please take a look at line 15. So we jump to line 15. So we have here go-to menu. Next, we have a context menu. The context menu allows you to first copy things, like copy the content of this list, which, well, copies just the text. You can copy the selection, which can be handy if you just want to, well, copy some lines into an email. You can copy values. You can sort. Well, sorting doesn't work here well, but here you can sort. No, not here. Later you can sort. So you have all your normal enable, disable, cut, copy, paste, and I put those in the menu because hey, why doesn't it work? Oh, now it works. Strange. So I put those in the context menu because this is a shorter move than going all the way up to the menu and finding here the disable menu command. Then it shows me how many lines I have, and those snippets here are all self-defined. I did a lot of tests here, as you see, and got a lot of commands. So let's say I make a new script. And now all our scripts should have some kind of header. So I can just click this and get some lines edited. So this is standard template for new script. And for example, you can also have here maybe a loop. So you just copy and paste useful script steps stored in preference in the plugin. We can also do by name. So we have here a search command where you can search in a script, and let's just see $, let's say counter. Let's see, does something happen? Oh, I had to select the lines, sorry. So select them, $index, $counter, replace. And so here's the original, and this is the modified copy by the plugin. And for the context menu here, you can actually define those yourself. And we have a couple of predefined, and there are a few people who made example databases with useful scripts for this context menu. Any questions so far?
Christian, when you're inserting, a predefined chunk like that, will it also save like field references and things like that that are context sensitive? Or will it only save like more generic things like variables or script steps that don't have any context?
No, this is well, we can't know in advance the IDs of any field. So in general, this is like we would copy and paste. And if you paste something where the ID doesn't match any ID in your database, FileMaker will show you that the field is not found. So it's just like if you would do copy and paste yourself.
Okay, thank you.
So,
yeah, I have a question too. There was a chat comment about the script text not lining up with the line numbers, and I imagine that's a consequence of being able to set the font size and color. Is that the case, Christian?
It's due to the zooming here. So the line numbers are drawn by FileMaker with a fixed distance. And when the plugin uses the zoom feature, you see that we get less numbers here on the left side, because FileMaker does query the list here, how many entries it has. But if I click here somewhere, so I click on this line, and the breakpoint will show up for line 11, but line 11 is actually showing here. So while it doesn't look nice, I can't do anything about it. But it still works. So I can click here to toggle the breakpoint, and will just not show at the right spot. Yeah, the Windows-based people, I'm so sorry. I tried for years. I can't do anything on Windows. It's all custom drawing by FileMaker. But this is possible on macOS because FileMaker uses standard system controls, which the plugin can work with. So we can actually do things like here add our own callback function to be called by the system if the selection changes. So we can look what's the current entry in the list. We can see, oh, it's loop. And we have internally, of course, a list of all the localizations for loop. So this will work in French too, and in Spanish. And then we can look through the lines and find the matching end loop or exit loops lines and do that. Okay, let's go to something else. Let's say we go to managing databases. This may be a dialog you use quite often. And the first thing is we can show you the IDs for your fields if you like. This can be turned on and off, and the plugin will add an extra column here to, well, show you the IDs of the fields. Once you have this list open here, you can, of course, use our context menu to, well, copy the list. If you need a list of script steps, no, a list of your database fields, you can copy that. You can actually make a spreadsheet and paste it here, and you see you get columns into the spreadsheet. We can do cut, copy, paste, select all. We see how many we have selected. And here the sort should work. So I can select them all and can say sort. And you see we sorted them alphabetically. The next thing is you can press Command F here. And you get a search field. So if you know there is a timestamp somewhere, but you don't know where it is, you can just go over all the entries with Command F, or Command F is the find field. Command G is the next one, or you use navigation here and just go and find things. Any questions about that? Okay. So this is for the fields. The same works here for the tables. Also, I don't expect you to have hundreds of tables here. And you can show the table occurrence ID here. And then we have the relationship graph. And for the relationship graph, we put a search field here on the bottom right. And you can just pick something. Assignment. So if I press return key, it starts the search, it finds it, it highlights it. Works very nice. I can even type here. So I can just type I, and it will show me the entries which match the subtext. So SS is in assignments and in assets. So this may be useful if you have a big graph here. Okay.
That is great.
Thank you.
That worked for multiple occurrences in the relationship graph with different names.
Yeah, if you have several, let me just make two. So assignments. So I can go to the first one, it goes to the next one, goes back to the first one. So just don't press too often return key, otherwise you click the OK button here. But you can jump between several of them. So what can we do next? We can go to, what else do we have in FileMaker? We have a data viewer. Okay. So here's the data viewer in FileMaker. Let's see. Oh, I don't have any entries here. So let's make just a little dummy script to create a few entries. So let's say we have a local variable. We have a global variable. Let's say we need fields. Do we have a global field? I don't see one. Test global. Let's create a global field quickly. So we set a field, description, test, and that's a global field. Okay. Give me another line to stop. Debugger. Oh. I'm sorry to report that the FileMaker Maybe it was the wrong version. FileMaker 1921. I have so many copies of FileMaker here. Can be difficult. Let's see, is my script still there? Yeah, it is. Click debug. So, okay, I have the script. I can step through. I now have a few entries here. If you click on the title bar here, you can bring the data viewer to the front. You see here your entries. If the font doesn't meet your needs, you can press Command+ to make it a little bit bigger. If you have too many fields here, you can actually hide a few. We have Command Option F to hide the fields and Command Option G to hide the global variables. So, and we have a list of all those shortcuts on the blog in an article if you need them.
What brought them back?
The same hotkey. So Command Option F or G, F, G. You can show and hide them as needed. Shortcuts. So you see here. Yeah, here's a list. So we just had this here. Command Shift F, show and hide fields, and G for the global variables. So this may be handy for you. Next thing is you may want to search here. So again, you can search here and assets, and you can just find your entries. $A, yeah. Can be handy. So in the script debugger.
Excuse me, will it search also in the values that are being set or no?
Hello? It searches in all the visible text.
Thank you.
So next thing is here in the script debugger, you can of course search, you can zoom, you can copy the script if you need. And if you move your mouse over a variable name, the plugin will show you what's in the variable name. So $A is a text, $B is also a text, and this field is a text, it's empty. And this is a field with text. Oh, we don't have a record, that's why it's empty. Let me just show you why the variable type is important. Let's say we have a number and the number is 1, 2, 3. And we have another thing which looks like a number, but it's not. Oh, give it a different name. So if I go to the debugger, I can now see here that the plugin will tell me that $num it's looking like a text, like a number. 1, 2, 3, it looks like a number, but if it's internally a text, FileMaker will treat it differently in things like a compare. And you may need to use getters number to convert it to an actual number with the same content. That's the reason we show you the data type here of the value. And if you have a lot of variables in your calculations here, you may find it handy to have a way to see the value without scrolling through the data viewer. Hello? Yeah. Okay, just some noise. Okay, that's for the debugger. Do we have any questions so far? Otherwise, let's take a look on this calculation dialog we saw. So FileMaker has a dialog to specify calculations, and you may use it every day, and you may have some calculations, 1 + 2. And the plugin can actually do a syntax check. Let's cause an error. So here's a syntax error, and you see the plugin also shows you the bracket in red because the bracket is not correct. And you may notice that we have a bigger font here too, because, well, for presentations, I like to use the plugin feature for the font size. The plugin also shows you your line number and column position. And if you select some text, it shows you how long the selection is. So remove the syntax error, and we recently got an execute button here, so you can execute your calculation while you are developing it. So you may just think about something like here, make some kind of calculation. I have to use comma here for my computer. Oh, sorry, this is it's maybe a summary field. But you can do any calculation you like and just have it execute. And as you may notice, the plugin highlights the matching bracket if you click on a bracket. So you may notice which bracket belongs to which other bracket. And this even works within a text. So if you have, let's say you have some SQL, select star from my table where, say we put something in brackets and say deleted is 0. And so it works even inside a string, and it doesn't care for the brackets outside of the string. So I can click on this one and it doesn't highlight any matching one because there is no matching one. Even if I put one here outside, this will not find the outside bracket. So it may be useful for you. Any questions here?
Is there any provision for setting our own colors to be used for all of these different functions, or is it just okay?
Yes, you can set it. We can take a look later on the rule set. So we have a standard
Awesome.
Rule set for you. We have actually one for light colors and one for dark colors. So if you use dark mode, you get a different set with lighter colors. So what's next? Yeah, custom functions. You may all like to use custom functions from time to time. And let's say I make here my new create function. It gets a few parameters, A, B, C. And the function, let's say, does A plus B multiplied by C. And now you may have a function you may think about, well, I can do a syntax check here. Okay, it's correct. I can execute it, I get nothing. And we thought about this and we got you a way to define a test case here in the function right away as a comment. And so you can actually define values for all your parameters. The plugin will see this comment and takes this assignment, and you can use it to set the parameters. And then we calculate you this expression and show you the result. So when you write your own custom functions, you can provide some test cases here. You can have several values, and we pick the last line. So you can just disable it by making it a regular command and get back the other values. So you can have several values here, and those can actually be calculations. So I can again put here some sinus n to get a number. So this can be a calculation on its own if you want. And you have a test case here, and yeah, A couple of people think it's useful, especially that you can just check syntax without clicking the OK button and trying to leave the dialog. So let's take a look again on this preference dialog. We had the syntax highlighting. We have the blocket highlighting. We have the variable name checks. We have the search box. So you can enable all these features. And if I haven't mentioned it already, all those features are free to use. You just need to install the plugin. Context menu, Columbus. That's something. Columbus is something I need to show you. Minimum font size, also very useful. And because my MacBook has a touch bar, I actually have here a setting to block the escape key unless I press Option Escape. This prevents me from from losing a calculation while typing and while hitting the ESC key without wanting to close the dialog. You can pick your favorite font, and JetBrains Mono is a special font for developers with a few extra things like showing the equal signs and a greater sign as an arrow, for example. I wanted to show you the Columbus, yeah. So let's say you go and you define a layout. You may have this Columbus here, and you may be annoyed that the Columbus is small every time you open the dialog. But if you have the plugin installed, the plugin will remember the Columbus for you. So it stays the same between opening and closing the dialog several times. Also, of course, Command F, the search feature is there. It's available in over 20 lists within the FileMaker user interface. So whether you search a securities entry, layout, a custom function, well, whatever you search, it's in all the dialogues. Yeah, value list, find, type, finds it. So, questions about that? Well, I think I showed you a lot of those features. So maybe I show you the example database for the syntax coloring. There's my FileMaker. It's still running. Okay, so when you download the plugin, you get this folder with examples, and there are a lot of examples. And there is one for the syntax coloring here. This one has a list of rules. Oh, that's not it. But there's a nicer one. We have one provided by Russell Watson, FM Syntax Colorizer. And he had the idea for all the features. So he came up with a huge list of rules. And based on those are the default rules in the plugin. So he has defined that an else script step in English will show in blue, and else if it's with empty brackets will show in brown. And then you have perform script and so on. And you have a few more special rules. Like here, if there are special conditions, you get different colors. Let's go down. You see, it's a long list of definitions. And if you have a comment, for example, which starts with the text fix me, it turns the command line in red. with to do and here in what's it's
Christian,
yeah.
so the plugin is providing the colorization?
The plugin does the colorization, and you can configure it with plugin commands.
Oh boy,
So,
how did I miss that?
yeah, it's been there since 2012, I think.
Yeah.
So we have here in our function list, we have the syntax coloring things. You see, there's a lot of things you can change in the plugin, and there is a important one is add tag. There you define a selector, a text, and a color. So let's go to the example. So you can, for example, say in a script step, if its command is, well, set variable, this is German, pick this color with hex notation, or just if you're in a formula and the round bracket color should be blue. And you can just go to the data viewer, you can put this line in, press evaluate, and the next time the script workspace redraws, it will change the color for the new rule set. So like you can define special colors for script steps which contain the missing field line to be read. That's actually what we have here. There's a table missing, field missing, function missing, not compatible. Those all turn red by default. You can have these different colors for the comments. You can have a color for global variables. You can actually give special global variables a specific color, so you can distinguish them between your normal globals and your special globals. You can, for this calculation dialog, you can of course color your brackets, your and symbol, your digits, equal signs. You can give every FileMaker function here a specific color if you like. Yeah, and
Is it
variables.
bolding? Is it putting those in bold as well?
No, bold doesn't work, because then the plugin would change how wide the function name is, and this doesn't work well with the web, for the line web, for the. So we tried that. Caused a lot of problems. So you can define your own rule sets here if you don't like our default, and either you go here and take this example database and maybe change your color set. So here are a few color sets predefined. You can define your own color palette and then assign it to your rule sets you like to use. Or you just write a little script in your own database solution to just tune the few colors you may want to have changed. Like there are some people who like comments in green, some like comments in gray. This is so you may have just your favorite 4 or 5 lines to adjust the colors to your needs. Yeah, so this is a database for the colors. Beside those syntax coloring things, we also have, oh yeah, the snippet storage may also be useful. This is an example another user provided. So we can, in FileMaker, copy something, create a new snippet with the XML, and at any point we can copy that back and paste it later. So this can store all your scripts, custom functions, tables, fields, layouts, and for your later use. And this is using the clipboard functions in our plugin to do that. But while I'm at that, where is my, here, script workspace context menu commands database. So this database defines the script steps we had earlier. Let's see, this is find sequence error handler. This is, for example, the loop example I had. So we have here script steps copied from FileMaker. So you copy them in FileMaker. You use here the button to put them in the field as XML. Then this code is created automatically from you based on this let statement here, which introduces, well, tells the plugin well, to take the XML, put it on the clipboard, and then run the paste command in FileMaker to actually paste it. So we leverage here existing functionality by the MBS plugin to run any menu command in the FileMaker menu anytime you like. So just let's make a new one for you. Let's say we like to maybe say we use off. So let's say we want to start every script maybe with a line here, disable user to cancel script. And this may be very useful for us. So we go and copy it. Go here, make a new entry. Paste it. Oh yeah, script steps. It's not yet using our auto mode. So this is already okay. Always enabled, yes. Install. What? Empty title? Oh, yes. Allow user upload. Let's say this is a title. Install. Go to the script workspace again, and now we can add that as often as we want. And you may want to build your own library, and maybe you want to share your favorite snippets with your friends. And this database may help you. Any questions for that?
I have a more general question, just something that I'm curious about. The syntax coloring that you can do, do you also have a version of that that works with things like JSON arrays and things like that?
Yeah. So but besides all those free developer add-ons, we have actually over 6,000 functions in the plugin. And here with a JSON example, it's not sure which one it does it, but no, JSON. No, that doesn't. Why is there no example? This one is. Oh yeah, this is here colored already. So you have some JSON. Let's see. So we have a JSON.colorize function where you can pass in some JSON text and get it colored like this here. So let's see, I can copy, I can paste, undo, and this is without color, and then I can run the script to get it colored. We also have this function to turn JSON into HTML, so we can show it in a web viewer. We also have a JSON.format function, so I can just change this and say, first format it. And our formatting is a little bit different than the one from FileMaker. So you can use either the built-in from FileMaker or ours, and then you can use the colorizing in the plugin to colorize your JSON. And this is very useful if you have some, let's say, developer layout where you show you actually the input and output of your web service calls. And then you may see your issues right away. We also have
That's really nice.
XML colored. So you may have some XML, and then you have the colored version with the plugin. Let's see the, oh no, it's in the button. So edit the button. there, it's not in the button, it's in the field definition. So here's a colorize call, and we can also here use our format function to actually format the XML. So it gets intended. Very useful if you, well, just display it for debugging.
Indenting?
Yeah, here, there's space in front. Okay. I'm not a native English speaker, so.
Your English is great, Christian.
Yep. And you can speak 2 languages. I can only speak 1.
Oh, well, I also speak French.
Well, now I'm even worse.
Okay, well, we learned it at school, and we just live a few, I think it's 120 kilometers to the French border, so you can just drive there to get some baguette. We have a lot of other examples, but the key thing I want to talk about is that you usually don't use just one group of functions in the plugin. We have, so if you have the list of functions, we have here over 100 topic lists, 100 topics. So you usually don't just see one thing as its own, you combine them. For example, let's say I have, let's see, I have an example with via, so Windows here. So you may find it interesting that we have functions to talk to a scanner device, a flatbed scanner or an automatic feeder scanner to scan your documents. We have the functions for Mac and Windows, and we even have the older Twain function. So we have 3 function sets to deal with scanners, and you have to decide which one is right for you, or maybe you use several, like one for Mac, one for Windows. And when you scan, you may get the pictures scanned. Where is it? This is picture. So we scan, we get pictures. We get the pictures, we build the PDF. So, and then you may combine that with our PDF function to actually build a PDF document with all the pages you got from the scanner. And in between there, you may even use our graphics magic functions to work on the image data. And in this case here, actually check if the page is all white and then skip it. So in this example, we combine scanning functions, graphics functions, and PDF functions together to one solution to do a job. In this case, getting several pages of scanned documents into a PDF document. We may also combine this with our OCR functions to get the text from the PDF and put it in the document. Now, to take the scanned picture, pass it through OCR, and then put the text on it. I can show you that.
Christian, is there any regular expressions functionality?
Yes. So this example here takes a picture with some text, does the OCR, and then it places on top of the picture in a PDF document the actually text, so you can have this PDF. You can export this PDF. And you can actually select the text. So in the PDF you got. So let's jump to regular exceptions, so regular expressions. We have here regular expression functions, but I like to show you something new I made in the last weeks, which is data detectors, maybe more interesting. So this is using special regular expressions under the hood provided by Apple through their frameworks to find useful information in a text like phone numbers, dates, web addresses, postal addresses, as well as email addresses. So we can take an existing text just like Safari or Apple Mail, run it through the data detectors, and they will tell us where a phone number is or where you find a date or time. And if you just need a few normal regular expressions, we also have those. Like for example, we have the replace all here, where you can just search through a text and replace text with a certain pattern with other text, or you can extract a piece of text. So like here you have a phone number in a text and you have a pattern for, well, some kind of phone number, and then you can find this phone number in the text and get it back to you. Or here for a bank account number. So yes, we have regular expressions. Do you have any questions? Or otherwise, I may show you an example on iOS. Because I do have here an iOS project ready to run. So it's launching. I can also open the solution in FileMaker. So this is my example project here in the simulator for iOS. So I have the feature that I can not just preview a document, but actually on the iOS device annotate it. So I can say I have a PDF or a picture, and I can draw on the picture and say this is maybe important here. This is an important piece. And then I can click done, and my drawings are saved here. So people can use the operation system provided features to mark up a document on the iOS device, like an iPad or an iPhone. And this is by building your own iOS app for FileMaker with the FileMaker iOS SDK. And you only need a few script steps to open this panel to show the document. Here, we add a container. We register the script to call it when we are done. We show the panel, and when it's dismissed, we ask the plugin if we got a new file, and then we just import it into our container field. Anyone like that?
Yeah, that's really
amazing.
nice.
Oh, I don't have time to read all your comments.
Mostly it's people just really liking what you're doing here.
Yeah, thanks.
Christian,
okay.
How do we get in touch with you?
Yeah, well, this all started 2006. I'm just a C developer, basically, which well, has a few friends in the Claris community who constantly ask for new features. So let's close this. So yeah, I know there's another plugin to do a few assistant things, but you can have both if you like.
So it's my understanding that the plugin comes with many free features. Most of what you showed today were free features until we got into the last few things, and that then there's some kind of a pricing model for other features that the plugin features. Right now, is that are those on a like by need basis, like you purchase only the things you need, or is there like a kind of a package thing on it, or how does that work?
Well, yeah. Let me explain. So you can download the plugin. You can just enjoy all these developer features for free. You can play with the plugin features. You may see a dialog coming up telling you that the license key is missing if you actually use our regular functions. You can see the price list on the website, of course, and if you like, you can also get a trial key if you like to play with the plugin for a month or two without any annoying dialogues. And then if you want it, you basically pay for the first function and the rest is free. Yeah. So we really hope you like a few of the functions.
Love them.
Okay, going back to the, so this morning I thought about an example. Let's say you may want to have some database watching a folder. Then you may start with using our schedule features to have a script run every few minutes to check a folder. Like here, you can have a script run at a time after delay. So you can say, run it after 2 minutes and then repeat every 2 minutes, or run a script when the user is idle so you can exit the record. When you have the script running, you may want to list the files in a folder. So you go to our files section and you look for the list function here to list you the files in a folder. Then you have the list, and you may want to go to our list functions to actually look on the list, compare it to the items in the last list you had, so you see which file names are new. Then you go to maybe the pass function there's pass there. So you add a pass component, so you build from the folder pass and the file name, you build the final pass. Then you may want to check if you know the file already. So you go to the hash function, say I need a hash for the file content. Here, like, let's see, no, this is that's a digest file, this one. So you say I have a file path, I need a SHA-512, and you quickly get back the hash. And then you may use our SQL functions in FileMaker.
I don't have any like wood spin or anything to make sandwiches, so I'm just doing these blur rolls, what are those called, rolls?
That's fine.
Cutting them in half, putting chips on top of them.
Oh, that's fine. Did you ever eat your sandwich from last night?
The sandwich makers may mute themselves, please. So you have the hash of the file. You may do a little SQL query to see if you know this hash already, if there's a record for it. Like you make a select count to see if you got a record with that. And then you may do an insert record. And you still may notice that you did not switch a layout for this. You do this all in the current context, whatever it is. You create a record in your table and say, we got a new file, we import it and put it in a record. If it's a PDF file, you may go and use our PDF functions. Well, we have PDF Kit for Mac and iOS, as well as the Dyna PDF functions if you need something cross-platform, so it runs on Linux and Windows to extract the text. So there's an extract text function. And
there's
then you
so
have
many
the
great
text
features here.
Yeah. So you combine
I'm
them.
sorry.
Yeah.
Uh-huh.
We have
That's awesome. I'm sorry to interrupt. We're actually out of time, Christian, but I really appreciate you showing what you have here. I think this is, it's really quite an amazing plugin. I think just the free features are, certainly worth a download. And the list on your website that you're showing now, I mean, it's just, it's such a huge list. I think it would take quite a while to comb through everything there and decide what we each find useful for ourselves. But there's just a ton of functionality here. So I'd encourage everybody to go to monkeybreadsoftware.com and take a look at this more in depth and see how it applies to you and your particular development.
There was a question about the server. So
yeah,
you install the plugin where you use it. We made this graph for you. So if you use FileMaker Pro and perform script on server, you need a server license and the plugin installed on the server. If you only use it local in FileMaker Pro, you need a seats license.
so it could be installed on server and then distributed to all the users that way.
Yeah, only for perform script on server. There's also an example on how to automatically install the plugin. So you can install the plugin by a script on all your clients if you need.
Oh, this is amazing.
Yeah, so we have here user guides, and there is section installation somewhere here, automatically install, and there are a few things you may want to know. And then here's a sample script which installs the right plugin on the right platform.
Awesome.
Just brilliant.
Really good stuff, Christian.
If you have a question, don't hesitate to contact me. You can just email us if you have a question, and if you find a bug or you have a feature request, yeah, please.
Thanks so much for your time, Christian.
Really appreciate it. Yeah, very, very much.
I think.
All right. Well, we're gonna keep things moving here, next we have Tim Owen, and Tim is going to share some record flagging insights with us, and take it away, Tim.
Okay, thanks, Bob. I'm going to stop my video so you don't see my perplexed face as I try and remember what I'm going to say. But I'm going to share my screen, and I'm going to share one screen at a time. The first one is sort of a little presentation and sort of a la PowerPoint. Hopefully you can all see it now.
Yes, we can.
Okay, great. So anyway, a lot of you know me as a fairly long-standing FMDiSC member. Since I moved away from LA, I haven't been able to attend many FMDiSC meetings. So maybe the one good thing about the COVID pandemic is that it's enabled me to attend FMDiSC meetings again in their new virtual format. But I've been a FileMaker Business Alliance member since 2004, and I'm currently a Claris partner. I work primarily as a sole practitioner consultant specializing in solutions for film festivals and other arts-related nonprofit organizations. I've been around the block as far as development technologies go. I've used the separation model, the session model, anchor buoy, have my own field naming conventions. Like the majority of the FileMaker developers of my generation anyway, I come from a non-IT background. And I can tell you a little bit about the story of that, going right back to the beginning. So I had a pretty normal childhood. I loved making treehouse forts, making model airplanes, taking things apart to see how they worked. In hindsight, I can see that some of these left brain interests were sort of an early warning sign of a latent predisposition to FileMaker and database addiction. So in the first 2 years of college, I majored in economics until I discovered why they call economics the dismal science. So I then switched to geology, which was a lot more fun, sort of a virtual rocks festival, and also a lot more interesting. Sorry?
I'm afraid Michael's not here today. Can I take a message?
Can you all hear me?
Yeah, we can hear you. Could everyone who's not presenting mute themselves, please?
Okay, well, anyway, to continue, geology was a lot more appealing in an appreciation of a sort of a right-brained appreciation of, of nature's, the beauty of nature's art forms. So I ended up spending nearly 20 years in Australia and Papua New Guinea and Fiji, some of the more remote parts thereof, working as a mineral exploration geologist. In 1987, I spotted an early Macintosh sitting on the table in the office where I worked. And I figured out how to use the Mac to manage the mineral exploration and mining leases that I was responsible for the company. Initially, I was using Excel macros to do that until I discovered the first relational database for Mac, namely Borland Re++. I came back to the USA and moved to West Hollywood in 1991. Now, LA is a great place to experience geological phenomena like earthquakes, but not so good a place to be able to practice mineral exploration. So I ended up making the natural career segue to doing database consulting for film festivals. I'll tell you a bit about what led up to that. For a couple of years, I was sort of torn between the force and the dark side, doing Mac support for nonprofit organizations and becoming a board member of the Los Angeles Macintosh Users Group. At the same time, I was doing consulting work in ACT and Microsoft Access for Windows version 1. In 1994, I discovered FileMaker 2, and by the time FileMaker 4 came out, I was hooked. So what I'm demoing today is a record marking or flagging technique, and I'll explain the difference in the terminology shortly. I developed this as a client's request in 2004 using FileMaker 6, and then I revised, updated, and modularized it in 2016. Now, it's pretty simple in operation, but it's a little bit more complex under the hood. I will be sharing the examples file. Since we're running late, I'm going to speed through this pretty quickly, and there may or may not be time to answer any questions. So at this point, I'm going to switch to the FileMaker example screen. And let's go to that. Okay, are you seeing the FileMaker interface now?
Yes.
Okay, thanks. Anyway, this is just a sample contacts list. And on the right side, you can see what appears to be a normal conventional flag field. You can click on it to flag and unflag records. And let's just flag a few at random here. And you can do a find for the marked records, as I call them, and then perform the find. Now, although this looks like a conventional flag field, it's actually not. What the client had requested was a way of marking records so that individual staff members could each have their own set of marked records, at least temporarily. And so this required that it be based on a global field that is being used here as a multi-value key. We'll look under the hood of that in a few moments, but I want to go on to describe how it works from the user standpoint. It was designed so that all the record marking operations, and I'm using the term marked and marking in lieu of a flag or flagged, to differentiate it from the conventional flagging technique. So there are three buttons which drive all the operations. One that says show marked records. So if we show all records, instead of doing a find, we can just click on this button, which shows the 4 records that we've got in this case. So I'm going to show all records. I'm going to unmark them all by clicking on this button. And then for the purpose of the demo, I've created a scripted shortcut to create a set of marked records, and I'm going to use this same set at various times during the demo. So there it is, that we've got 5 marked records, and we're in our whole record set of 500 sample records in this case. Now I'm going to filter the list by state. I'll choose California here, and then I'm going to say I want to mark all the records that are in California for whatever reason. So I'm going to click on the button Mark Found Set. So we now get a pop-up that says, hey, there are already 1 or more marked records outside the current found set. And we're asked to specify whether we want to keep those marked records that are outside the found set marked, or whether we want to unmark them before we mark all the records in the current found set, which is the 72 records in California. So we're going to say, let's keep the already marked records. So it's going to go ahead, and now it tells us, we've asked us whether we want to show all the marked records or remain in the current found set. So I'm going to say all, and then it tells us how many marked records there are. And now I'm going to go to show all records, and then I'm going to go back and filter by California again. And now we can see that all 72 of the California records are marked. But if we now say unmark all the records, it asks us if we want to unmark every marked record in the database, or only the ones in the current found set. In this case, we'll select the default, which says found set, and that removes the marks from all of our 72 California records. And if we then go to show marked records, it just shows us the 3 that were marked that were outside of California. So that exhibits the nuances that you need to take into consideration to create a simple operating procedure, but still base it all on just three simple buttons. So I'm going to, and now if I select unmark all again, it simply unmarks all the records because the found set did not contain any that weren't marked. So let's take a look. I'm going to select all records here. And let's take a look under the hood. I've created a special developer utility layout for that purpose. And here on the left, we see the global field that holds the record IDs of the marked records. And here is a calculation field that counts the number of marked records via a self-join relationship to the same table. Now I'm going to reproduce those same 5 marked records magically here. As you can see, the record IDs appear in the list here. It calculates the number of marked records based on the relationship. Now, you may notice that I use a particular field naming convention that I've used since FileMaker 6 days. It's not so relevant these days now that you can see field types in when you're in the script workspace, but it's always worked for me, so I've stuck with it here. And that convention is that calculation fields are prefaced with ZC. And then I use camel case without spaces for the actual field names. Global fields are ZG and summary fields are ZS. So this means that if you're sorting a field list of fields alphabetically, then the calculation, global, and summary fields sort at the end, which is useful sometimes. So we'll have a look at the calculation mark field, which is running the whole thing. And what this does is it uses the pattern count function to resolve to a value of 1 if the record ID appears in the global list of marked records. Now, because the primary keys in this example file are serial integers, you've got to make sure that the values in the list are unique. And to do that, you've got to surround the record ID with, the line returns. And to make sure that you also always pick up the first and the last values in the global list, you've got to surround that with paragraph marks as well. Now, if you're using fixed length alphanumeric keys, such as the UUIDs that FileMaker now creates for you by default, you don't have that restriction, and you can simplify the calculation as you see here. Now, over on the right, you see the calculation that counts the mark records. As I've mentioned, this simply uses a self-join relationship to count the related records. Now, you don't have to use a relationship to do this. You can use an execute SQL function instead, as you see here. The drawback to that is if you're using an execute SQL function, for that to resolve involves a record commit. Whereas, as most of you probably know, if you have a calculation that's based on a global field, it resolves as soon as you move out of the field without necessarily committing the record. So that has its advantages, and it's why I continue to use the one self-join relationship in the technique rather than using an execute SQL state. Now, there's one summary field, which is simply the total of the mark field, and I'm using this only for the purposes of the script that drives the whole thing. And you could use it for some reason in a summary report if you needed to, but that's not the reason it's been included here. So I'm going to go back to our context list, and then I'm going to switch focus to the script workspace in a minute and show you the script. Now, when I originally designed this technique back in FileMaker 6, of course, we didn't have variables and custom functions and functions like a get layout table. And there were actually 5 different scripts that with a total of about 250 lines of code that were necessary to drive the whole technique. Using Todd's FileMaker, modular FileMaker technique, I was able to get that down to a single script of about just over 100 lines of code, which makes it possible to copy and paste the script from one solution to another. So I'm going to switch screens now to the script workspace, and there we've got it. So you should be able to see that now. Oops, let me get this out of the way. Okay, can you see the script workspace now?
Yes.
Right. Okay. Thanks. Anyway, so I'll describe the structure of the script. At the beginning here, I've got a sort of a script header, and the structure of this I've sort of borrowed from John Sindelar's seed code solutions, which I've used in a couple of my own solutions. And then the basic technique is that because this one script is driven by the 3 buttons that I showed you earlier, all of them depend on a script parameter. So the first thing the script does is set a variable to the script parameter that's going to be used by the buttons to call the script. The next gets the layout table context and then sets a variable for that. And then the next variable sets the primary key field. Now, for each of the 4 fields that are used in the technique, that has to be hard coded. So if someone isn't using my own field naming conventions for the equivalent fields, then you have to specify that in the variable script steps. And then once those variable representations of the field names involved in is set, then it uses a get field to set those values of the fields into a variable. And then the rest of the script, well, this, as you may have noticed, the mark field actually has a button on it, so that when you click on the checkbox field that sets the mark, you're actually running a script. So that if you're in find mode, you need to intercept that, and then clicking on the field actually sets the field to 1, so that you can perform a normal find. Okay, after that, there are 3 sort of subroutines, 1 each for each of the 3 buttons that calls the script. And I'll run down towards the end here. And this there's another one for the button that says unmark all records. But in order to intercept, if the users specified that they want to like unmark all records first, it needs to perform another subscript, another subroutine to unmark the found set. So those are the four sort of subroutines that drive the whole thing. And I've tried it out, and it is possible to copy and paste the script from one solution to another, with the proviso, of course, that you create the required fields and then name them properly for the context of the script. So that is that's the way it works. Now we're running short of time, but while I'm in the script workspace window, are there any sort of urgent questions about that? Okay, there's a big silence. That means that you've all taken it in. And I can now switch screens back to my, my presentation here. Where is it? There it goes. Okay, you should be able to see this now. So I'd like to make some acknowledgements and thanks. First of all, it was a tip from Peter Bannon about using globals in relationships that fundamentally enabled the technique that I've just shown you. Peter, of course, was an early FileMaker plugin developer, and through with his Troy plugins. And of course, we've just, and my mind is still spinning from Christian's demo of all the myriad things that it's possible to do with plugins these days. And I think I'll be trying to use some of them myself. Also got to thank Todd Geist for Modular FileMaker, and just one of his many contributions to the FileMaker community. And Heather Winkle for transforming the FileMaker interface design landscape and enabling design challenged people like myself to build better and better looking solutions. If the example file I just showed you has a reasonable interface, it's partially due to all of her efforts while she was at FileMaker. And finally, I'd like to thank Bob Shockey and the FMDiSC founding board members for creating what is widely acknowledged to be the world's best FileMaker user group.
Without a doubt.
Bob organized today's meeting, and I thought I know a lot of you recognize him as FMDiSC's very own official FileMaker idol. I was at the FileMaker DevCon in Phoenix in 2004 when he won that award. So thanks again, Bob, for all of your efforts. And so we move on to my own questions about, how really useful is the sort of technique I've just shown you. After all, FileMaker has myriad ways of doing searches and selecting multiple criteria and to select record sets. I don't know if any of you have ever had a long time user of one of your own conclusions ask you, well, what does constrained set mean? And so that a lot of people don't take advantage of the features of FileMaker Pro. I think what this record marking technique does is it gives users the ability to define their own subjective criteria for record selection, for whatever reasons. And it also can be usefully combined, as I've sort of tried to hint, with more conventional record filtering or record find techniques. So the question I ask myself is, could you or would you implement this sort of technique as a FileMaker add-on? Is it even worth doing? I just don't. I don't know. I noticed that there haven't been any additions to on Todd's modular FileMaker site for the last 2 years, and all the interest these days is in add-ons, which of course makes it possible to monetize or commercialize the sorts of things that used to be free giveaways in this sort of the context that I've just presented as a tip and trick. So so I don't know. So maybe someone would like to comment on that question, and if you have any other questions about the demo I've just made, we may have a few minutes for that. I don't know, Bob, you'll have to give us direction on that.
Tim, first of all, thank you for doing this. What I found compelling about this from the very start was that you really thought through some things that might come up having to do with this technique. This is a technique that a number of people use and have used for quite a while, but you took it a little further. You thought about things like marked records outside the found set and so forth, and I really like that. These are the kind of things that come up in a clinch, usually when you don't have enough time to really address them fully, and so to have someone like you do the legwork on that ahead of time is great, and certainly some strong food for thought here. As a FileMaker add-on, I don't know. I'm still trying to kind of get a handle on what makes a good add-on and what doesn't, to be honest with you. I think it's a great feature that they've added on, no pun intended, to FileMaker. but I still haven't really gotten a sense of where the value is or isn't in any particular thing that you might try. So maybe if you're willing to put the thought in, put it out there and see what happens, then report back. Let us all know how it goes. Certainly good stuff here going on for sure.
Yeah, well, we'll leave unresolved that more important issue. But anyway, thank you for the listening and the opportunity to present my little tips and tricks demo. And I'll stop sharing now, and I think we're all eagerly awaiting the interview with Heather Winkle. As I said, I was at the FileMaker FMDiSC meeting, I think it was about 10 years ago, when she came down from the wedge and told us all about her work, and it was pretty exciting stuff. And so anyway, thanks again, and I'll stop sharing.
Without a doubt, and thank you, Tim. Okay, well, first of all, I want to let you all know that we're pioneering something new today, because in over 20 years, we've never done an interview format in FMDiSC. So this is really new, and I've never performed an interview. So here we go. Most of you here today will remember Heather Winkle as someone who she transformed FileMaker as a company in many ways. She oversaw the complete overhaul of the design surface to a CSS-based model and ushered in the tool set we know as themes and styles, which we all use heavily, don't we? And more importantly, she introduced design as a crucial element, both within the the FileMaker organization, as well as throughout the FileMaker community, which I think was just such an important addition. And it came along at a time when it really needed to happen. You know, since leaving Claris and Apple, she's gone on to a position as MVP of design. Is that right? Did I get that right, Heather? At
Right.
Capital One, where she oversees a team of 600 people. And she's graciously agreed to be interviewed here today. And I'm very grateful that you're here to do this with us, Heather.
Well, thank you.
It's really good to see you.
Oh, it's so good to see all of these familiar faces, and I'm actually all choked up. I can't believe I logged on to the meeting to see one of the last things I designed coming, you know, like in life, in use. I'm really choked up. It's so, oh my gosh, so nice to see your faces.
Well, leaving FileMaker and going to Capital One, that was a big move for you, both geographically and professionally. What was that like?
Oh, it was huge. And it was so very much based on what I needed in just personally. It was based on having been divorced, having my parents go through health scares, being completely across the country, and just thinking about the kind of energy I was putting into my work every day. And so I started from what was I looking for in my life itself, and then how would I build an experience around that. And that kind of gave me the freedom to ask the question, well, what would happen if I decided to move back closer to my folks? And what would happen if I actually didn't worry about the job first and thought about what every day was going to feel like? And so even though it was a huge shift, it's amazing how once I made the move, I picked a city where I had friends and some connections already, but that had kind of the food and music and dynamic artistic culture that I was looking for in my next location. Everything just started to fall into place after that. I met my now husband. I have a wonderful group of really artistic friends. We were able to adopt a little girl. My parents relocated, both made it through their scares, and now they live a couple blocks from us. And once I got here, Capital One is big in this town, and they were going through a transformation of their own, that essentially tech transformation, cultural transformation, design and digital transformation, agile transformation. And my friends who were there just said, it's ridiculous that you've done this so many times in your career and you're not helping us do this. You're right here in Richmond. And so that was the start of this job. And it's been incredibly challenging and satisfying. And I still miss FileMaker every day.
That's awesome. Well, we all miss you, and the impact that you had on things. But now you've got a team of 600 people working for you. That's got to be a diverse set of job descriptions, and you know, and managing so many. Do you get to do design work yourself? And you know, how does that all happen with a subject like design and that many people?
Well, that's what I've been figuring out for the 6 years since I've been here. I got here and the organization was about 40 people. And so we've seen just unbelievable growth in those years. And I was originally part of a line of business with just the credit card line of business, not the entire global organization, but now I actually oversee the whole organization. And I realized pretty quickly my new design work was not going to be what we actually shipped, but how we design an organization, how we design how the company works, how we design a cultural change, how we design systems that have to scale massively. So that's how I incorporate design into my work every day. And then I terrify my teams by going to design reviews and giving them critique. And they're just like our leader is talking about our work. And I'm like, no, I'm just a designer. Like, it's cool. Let me play with you.
Do they believe you?
No. But I mean, that's a big part of what we've been looking to build into the culture when we have so many different, very distinct lines of business, thousands of developers, engineers. It's so big, and we can't be precious as designers. We have to help everyone make better choices for what is going to end up in our customer experience, but also what's going to drive these really critical businesses. And so it's really been helping people not feel nervous about thinking through problems openly, collaborating and learning from each other, and just kind of getting over roles and identities and focusing in on actually what's the human need and what are the technical constraints and what do we have to see in the dollars that come out from this. Anyone should be able to contribute to that problem space.
So in what you just said, I picked out a couple of things that are sort of basic design principles, right? In just what you were saying, because you were talking about, what is the human need, which is, design principle number one always, right? And then also you were talking about helping them make the best choices, which is really, that's the other major element of design, is you're always faced with a series of choices that you have to make all the way down the road. And design is all about navigating that path correctly, right? That's good design.
Yeah, absolutely.
Doing that. So, yeah, interesting. So, the common image of a designer is someone who's creative, right? Who's not prone to fitting into, a corporate executive framework. So, do you find that environment challenging to fit into? I mean, this isn't your first rodeo either. You've done this at a lot of organizations, Adobe, you were at Intuit for a while, at FileMaker, which may have been the least corporate of all of them, I don't know, but, and now Capital One, which is probably the most corporate of all of them, as far as just the way you have to kind of fit in. So can you speak to that a little bit?
Yeah, it's, and I think Capital One is by far the most different from any of the places I was before. And really every place I worked before Capital One was a digital native company. And Capital One was based on technology, but very much built from a brick and mortar banking and credit decisioning system. And then also founded and established by a business analyst. And that is really the pervasive structure and culture of the company. And so for someone who came through an art degree and a team of people who tend to be working more on the qualitative than, versus quantitative side of things, it can be really challenging and hard to see into. And I definitely experienced politics in other places, but here it is, I don't want to call it political as much as just a structure and operating culture that was very foreign to me. It's one of the reasons I got my MBA partway through my career, was just to help be a better, stronger designer in a business context. But a lot of the advice I give to my teams and what I've used for myself is, as designers, like the human centricity of what we do, the empathy and exploration and curiosity we use to understand problems and people, those are tools we can apply to our partners and stakeholders as we're doing our work. And so, use that same curiosity and listen for the insights that are going to help you then craft a solution. That solution might not be digital. It might actually be interpersonal. It might be organizational.
Well, Let's excuse me. Let's talk about design in the world at large. What are you seeing happening, as far as design trends and the direction things are going in just, the world of design at large?
It's so incredible I think, to have watched it go from so limited to almost unlimited now. I mean, just the processing power we have in our hands, the ability to kind of imagine almost anything, and then it's just a matter of like how much time is it going to take to build it, because you can kind of build anything. That for design has opened up a huge world of imagination. But I think what I'm thinking a lot about these days is, as we get into more and more artificial intelligence and machine learning, that opens up such scale of, computational power and possibilities of making choices. And yet there's such a human view and soul that still needs to be applied to turning the data and choices into something that is meaningful for a person, for a user. And so I think designers need to start thinking about not just how they produce end designs, but how they help machines learn how to produce designs, and how to infuse the heart and the humanity into that artificial intelligence, because we're going to have to co-create, designers and machines. And so we have to, and I think designers and anybody who is working in this kind of problem solving space needs to be thinking about it in that way. And I would say asserting as much humanity as possible, so we don't go down the road into bad unintended consequences.
Right. I guess the job of the job of AI and machines like that traditionally has been just to give us quantitative answers easily, right? That they do the grunt work for us. But I think there's going to come a point where we're handing off some of more of the qualitative stuff to the AI as we go along, and so then we have to understand how to communicate that in a way that it gives us back the answers that we need. Rather than whatever it may decide. Do you find that people are the end users, the people who may go to say a banking website, for example, that their patience with poor design or incomplete answers or bad interfaces and so forth, that their patience is decreasing as time goes on, that the standard is getting higher?
Yeah, I would say I would kind of flip it around and say customer expectations are at the same time higher than they've ever been and still really low. I think that people have this skepticism of what an interface can really do for them, and low tolerance for bad design choices, shoddy transitions, lack of error prevention, all the basic things you try to design into your interface. People will feel the problems and just they'll abandon much more quickly. But I don't think they're expecting, I don't think they've completely shifted to have high expectations for the product or servicing experience yet.
You mean abandon the session, or when you say abandon, what do you mean? What are you referring to?
I think from if we think about a tool space, we'll abandon the mobile app and call the call center, right? And there's a huge cost to that for the company and for the customer. It's an erosion of trust. It's taking out time away. It's probably navigating through the IVR before they get to an actual human to talk to. But opening, taking a step back in specificity, with more people being able to develop products and put things into the market, any kind of bad interface choices are going to, cause people to ask, oh, is this the product I want to be using? And I could use this one or that one or the other one. And it's much easier to find other solutions just generally from the app environment.
Do you think that the money managers understand that on as deep a level as say somebody who is in interface design?
Tell me what you mean by money managers.
Well, like the accountants, they're always looking at the bottom line, and well, we don't want to spend money on that. They never want to spend money on features or things. They don't realize the value in spending money on training for users or things like that. It's always a challenge.
Yeah, I not specific to Capital One, but in any company I've ever worked for, the different, like, someone whose focuses on finance or whose focuses on maybe growth in a new market, there's often skepticism around, okay, but really what's the value a design choice is going to make to my top or bottom line? And I've worked really hard to find ways to quantify, like make the connections between, well, all right, let's see what you're looking at on your balance sheet. And let's see what parts of our ecosystem are actual choices that a user can make or that we could design for. And you can start to look at how one single button or selection or error can end up translating to dollar value, and then you multiply that with the times the customers hit it and the number of times they hit it over time. Even just a couple of quick, back of the envelope calculations could kind of start to shift the perspective of, oh wait, I could see how this could start to add up.
I know that as a designer, you like every designer's like this, you walk through the world and you see bad design decisions on a daily basis, whether it's elevator buttons or whatever, signage, etc. Some of them, sometimes they're quite humorous and sometimes they could have dire consequences even. But do you find that there are certain types of errors that you see people making over and over again, like a bad design decision you encounter on a daily basis, kind of universally?
Yeah, a couple come to mind, and my husband laughs at me because I complain about everything around us, and he's just like, "Isn't it exhausting?" And I was like, "Yes, I can't stop seeing." So the number one thing that I think people forget when they're designing is like, especially I'm really vividly remembering this from the FileMaker development environment. When you have a set of tools, you kind of start there and it can become a little bit of a hammer looking for a nail. And I think stepping back and remembering, all right, I'm going to design like the layout of the screen. Let's set that aside for a minute and think about how would a human in the real world actually think through the activity and perform the task. And that has like decision trees. It also has almost like physical movement through time. Like you think about process flow, or you think about, choices moving forward, moving backward, moving sideways. And so sometimes I see representations in an interface that actually contradict what you would find in real life. Like people, English speakers in particular, tend to go top to bottom, left to right. And forward motion ends up like taking you backwards through an animation. Or there's a button oriented in a place on the screen that like it's on the left when it should be on the right. People forget to look at the interface and ask, how will that feel to someone in the real world? And so that's a practice that I think everyone can use as just to kind of error check some of the choices.
When doing any kind of studies using eye movement to see where people are generally, like when they open up the screen to the site, the first place their eye goes
Mhm. Yeah, first place the eye goes, and then especially as we've shifted into a lot more hands-on devices, and that gets into like the physical constraints of like where do people's thumbs go if you're right-handed or left-handed. You read from top to bottom, but buttons are in closer proximity to your thumbs holding the phone. So, or tablet. Is the person having to comprehend, and what's the order with which they need to absorb the information? Where in that do they make choices? And then like, where are their hands as they're making those choices? It's those human connections, and what's the context that they're interacting with it that have to be thought through as well.
Heather?
Do you think there's, oh, go ahead, Lynn.
In using these reality-based standards or whatever you want to call it, the expectations to design, how do you keep your design fresh?
So that's such an interesting question. I was about to say what's great that we've come so far in design standards and usability standards is, Apple's human interface guidelines, Google's material, IBM has a whole set. Like, there are so many great standards of patterns that you can read, and you can know what are customers actually interacting with in the majority of their apps and computer interfaces. So that's a great place to start. But then in terms of keeping things fresh, there's rarely, unless there's a massive technology shift, like the iPhone, massive technology shift that gave us a whole new way of actually interacting. And that made gestures become more of a part of the design process. It really changed the nature of the interactions themselves. But barring that kind of massive technology change, the freshness, I think, comes in the ability to reduce the interface, let the computer do as much as possible, make the interface as light as, meaning not as dense, choices really clear, because when customers perceive freshness, a color change might be different, but a real behavioral change that makes things easier or faster or more in control for them is actually going to be a very meaningful freshness and advancement, and that's where I would focus. We don't need to
You mentioned.
Thank you.
Yeah, you mentioned earlier that you talked about sort of a cynicism that people have when approaching software, just kind of naturally, because mostly it's born of experience, right? And we remember the negative ones more than the positive ones. And I think one of the things a designer needs to address is not just that cynicism, but also a feeling, a sort of a natural anxiety when encountering like any screen that pops up. I think there's an undercurrent running there that, am I going to know what to do? Am I going to do the right thing or the wrong thing? Am I going to get an unexpected error message that I don't know what to do about, etc.? Do you think that simplicity is always the answer to that, or do you think it's more about emphasis?
I wouldn't say simplicity. I would say specificity, right? So knowing what the key choice is in that moment, how much information to give, how much can be held back, and falling back on one of the most basic human heuristics, which is feeling in control. And so if you've looked at, like, is the language clear and specific? And it might be, I'm thinking through some of the examples we've encountered just in, basic banking tasks, where sometimes fast and simple could take customers down a really dangerous path. Like there are some places we actually want to design friction into the process to make sure someone's aware that like, okay, if you click this button right now, you're actually going to start a fraud process, which is going to shut your card down. You're not going to be able to use it. You're going to have to change your number, right? So there are places where you want friction, but you still want the customer to feel like they're in control of that choice.
Huh, yeah, that's a great example. Yeah. So do you feel like, speaking of like, you know, a card customer looking at a website, do you think that the line between software and web is becoming blurrier over time? Do you think that the two things are just merging in people's minds, especially?
I think so, absolutely. So much of what we interact with, like, I can't always tell, is this a native app? Is this actually a web frame? I mean, you can tell when somebody's done it really badly. Like, you can tell when the implementation is, I mean, when you're using like an iOS pattern on Android and the close box is in the wrong place, like that you're gonna feel. When you're using something that is native, like a native pattern, like a toggle button on the web where it's not implemented quite the same way, you're going to feel that. But for the most part, like we don't know where we are anymore from a customer perspective. So from a developer perspective, knowing where, like, what is it clear to the user what environment they're in? Like, I can imagine somebody who's using a development environment or somebody who's using a solution who's on like a big desktop system, they're going to be pretty aware of what software they've opened and what environment they're in. But on a mobile device, it's not always clear. And so just being thoughtful about where they're going to encounter it. And if they're able to encounter, say, a web interface within an app frame, are you thinking through the interface choices? Like, are you making it more general, or are you making it really specific to that environment? I remember having those conversations endlessly in FileMaker, right? Because you never knew, was it going to end up on an Apple, you know, on Mac or on Windows? And so which one do you use? Which standard do you use? Or do you just make the best choice you can in the moment? And so it's mostly button-like, right? I don't think we've solved it well yet, as just kind of in general across all the different companies, like Apple, Google, you know, all of the big companies are still wrestling with this. But more and more, we're seeing the ability to separate the interface from the logic and do real-time rendering, right? Where, you know, you can flow things, you can expand and contract, it can be really responsive. And the more we can rely on that, I think the better it's going to be. But then again, we get into the situation of having to train the machines to do good things for the customers.
Heather, can I ask you a question about, I don't know what to call it, experience continuity? So if you are on an app, maybe you're on a phone app, or maybe you're on a website and you're struggling with some task or something like that, you know, you guys have the resources to make that a seamless experience. And as soon as they hit the phone tree, it's like, oh, this is the person who's having trouble with the wire transfer or whatever it is. And so, you know, the API proliferation has been huge lately. And so the edge of the application is blurrier than it ever has been. You know, you can touch a whole bunch of different data sources. And so you're way farther along than probably all of us are in terms of, you know, making disparate pieces of an experience come together. And I was curious if you had any thoughts on that. Is that too big brother-ish to say, oh, it's you. I know you were just having trouble with the, the wire transfer. And so, and then there's that, all that, you know, it's possible to collect too much data, right? Data breaches are a thing. I'm sure you guys have a big target on your back. And so you got to be careful about what you're holding, because it can harm somebody.
Yeah, it's very public knowledge that Capital One has been going through a massive transformation in how it taps into data, and certainly with the California, the CCPA, all the regulations that are coming in with how personal data is used. We've had a ton of attention on that, and yet all of the apps we use a lot in our just kind of personal lives, whether it's Instagram or Facebook or like whatever the lightweight fun things people use, and we feel how they know us and follow us, and we've seen how that can go down bad roads. But at the end of the day, people are expecting systems to start to know them. That's just a basic expectation that, yeah, the software is getting to know me. Therefore, if I was just here, or let's say I filled out my information on the last screen, and then the next screen asks me for some of the same information, like that's just silly. And so everyone, I think, is figuring out how much can be turned into a microservice, how much, what are the edges of the APIs, how are they owned and developed, and then how do you do that same kind of system for the interface? How much of it can be universal, how much of it can be distinct and local? I would say we're all still figuring it out.
I would think that would be a place for AI and AI and machine learning, where you have the user enter the site and the system's watching for what do they do? Where do they go first? And the next time they come back, I'm going to give that to them along with some other choices that they usually kind of go to.
Yeah, and just not getting into the creepy factor, right? And there's no professional way to say it, I don't think, right? Like, just don't be active. It's like, how much would we want to choose for someone versus present choices, right? And so it's just enough. It's like, we're smart enough to offer some choices, but at the end of the day, you're the one who's in control. And I think that's just the pattern for any kind of information or choice making that you all develop for. It's just thinking like, where's the edge before it gets creepy, or actually more frustrating. It's like, actually, I didn't want that choice, and you made it for me. Now I have to go back and do more work because you made a choice for me. So, right, finding that edge, and it's very much based on the customer and what it is they're trying to do.
What's the best way to communicate to your company? And I see something that I feel is just poor design, or is counterproductive to what I want to accomplish every time I go on the site.
Mm-hmm.
Who do you convey that to?
Well, I'm not supposed to say me in this forum. I can say me. Legally, it's interesting. We have, it's super thoughtful about where people can provide feedback. And so I think, I think that there is on the site a link which is about providing that kind of feedback. I will tell you that I get to see a couple years down the road in Capital One, and I know, and you're all familiar with like how far ahead the innovation cycles are for any given software product. Many of the designs that I worked on 3-5 years ago are just now starting to show up in our ecosystem, and very much because the company has been going through such a massive overhaul of its mainframe systems and just development abilities, and so the design organization is actually bigger and more mature than a lot of what we can do yet.
How do you ensure that those decisions made years ago are still relevant and timely?
Yeah. Well, I would say decisions are rarely carved in stone. And so it's the best decision at the time based on what you knew. But as new developments happen, that's part of why more and more companies are trying to, if not work in actual agile, be agile and have a much more dynamic development cycle so you can respond to the world.
So Heather, companies seem to want to, add the newest, shiniest interface techniques that they can to keep the site looking modern. Are there any of these techniques that you feel shouldn't be used, but are used on a lot of sites?
I'll tell you, I have a personal peeve with little chat bots that show up. Like, you just get to a site and you're like, I've been here for 10 seconds, and you're just like, how can I help you? And I'm like, I haven't even started to read the page yet. Like, and now I have to dismiss you. And then I go to the next, I click a link, go to the next page, and it's like, what can I help you with? I'm like, seriously, don't help me yet.
Especially when there's not even a human behind that.
Yes.
It's just going to be some bot trying to answer your question, and only if it fails do you get to speak to a human. Maybe. You're not even sure, right?
Yeah. I like to test bots just to see what's behind them. And I don't know if you played with Capital One's chatbot Eno, but it's a fantastic development story. It was designed, the character of it was designed by a woman from Pixar. And it was very intentional in how, it essentially helped us build the natural language processing that is now being used across a lot of our call centers with a lot of like the data interpretation. But from a human perspective, it was so intentional. It was intentionally androgynous. It was intentionally positive. It was, and it was really carefully constructed around the top questions people ask about finance. But it also was learning from all of this very random things that people would ask it. And some of the ways that showed up were during a lot of the heat of the protests this summer. Our chatbot had a lot of answers for Black Lives Matter questions. There are human questions that people ask that we realized giving the chatbot some of the answers that convey it has humanity woven into it, can build trust with a brand and can build trust in a technology. And Fast Company did a great write-up on this, which is why I'm talking openly about it. But I think that it has the potential to be a way into an interaction with the whole product ecosystem that feels more human, but yet you're conscious that it's a bot, and it's like, hi, I am a bot. I'm not trying to be a human, but I actually can tap into data and I can help you solve problems faster. And so I think it's a really interesting case study. So when used well, the bots can be great, but when they're annoying pseudo call agents, I don't know.
It's kind of a fine line to walk between too cute thing you want to murder versus actually helpful thing that you can trust. That's it doesn't seem like that should be a fine line, but it is. You're either on one side of that or the other, and with very little room in between. Except maybe in an uncanny valley. But you don't want clippy, and you also don't want to be helped by a minion from right. You don't want it to be too cute, you don't want it to be too, and you don't want it to be too smart probably either. You want it to be appropriately subservient, because people are, once again, everybody's seen Terminator. We're all a little bit afraid of our machines.
And much like human beings, if you want to interact with something or someone who doesn't think they know everything, who has some humility, and who's willing to problem solve with you, I think bringing that principle into software and interface design I mean, it's what people crave in interactions.
So as part of that, about just like the design process is this way, overall, is a lot of that about teaching the AI or the digital assistant or whatever you want to call it, the chatbot, teaching it to ask a lot of questions and gather an appropriate amount of information before it attempts to actually provide some kind of solution or help?
I think that there's always a combination of like offering directional answer or specific answer, but with an openness of like, or it might be this other thing, or is that what you meant? It's so kind of both parts in any response. So it's like, this could be the end of the interaction, or it could help you get to the next thing you need in the interaction.
Okay.
Which, I mean, like that pattern, what I just said right there is actually a great pattern for anything, whether it's a button or a link or an arrow or a message. Like, is this the end, or is it helping you get to the next thing?
So we talked about, bad choices in design in the everyday world. Do you find that there are also some things that you draw inspiration from, like other design sources, like cars, video games, appliances, that you go, oh, they nailed it there, I can use that?
Mm-hmm. I mean, everything. There's inspiration in everything. I think in particular, urban planning and signage and wayfinding is, I mean, it's all around us. It's, I mean, everything around us is designed. It's either designed or not designed, right? Like, it's either by nature or it's by design. And so I think you should always like notice when something feels right, why did it? Or if something feels wrong, why did it? So I've definitely fallen into the Peloton cult most recently, pandemic survival. But I can tell you that I think the Peloton ecosystem and interface and equipment has done a really impressive job of knowing what features people are going to connect with, how they're going to do it when they're a hot, sweaty mess and shaking and can't actually tap on something on the screen, like how it might actually connect into other parts of their environment, like the social media or real world meetups. That and some of the places that the kind of social grouping environments have evolved, like really looking at some of the social media environments, because that's where people are interacting, and they're interacting with humans and machines at the same time. And so I think seeing how those spaces are set up and what patterns are becoming familiar, I mean, we just have to accept that a large majority of customers are spending a lot of time in those spaces and just building expectations and rhythms because of it.
I'm not fortunate enough to have a Peloton, but I do hear people who have them talk avidly about them but they're always talking about like which instructor they like, which, whenever a thing like that, I listen to that, because whenever a thing like that I know is fairly technologically advanced, when they never talk about the thing itself and they always talk about something like a human element, especially one that they're seeing, through a screen, and that's all they're talking about, I think that speaks well for that thing.
It does. I also I spend a lot of time looking at car interfaces because of, I mean, I would look at plane interfaces or larger machine interfaces if I had more access to them, but cars are fairly accessible. And just given the the importance of being able to use all of the controls in a car, as well as how smart cars have gotten and how it's now kind of this partnership between the human driver and the car. I think it's really, I'm really impressed at how cars have managed to evolve some of their controls to satisfy kind of this this scenario where both the machine and the person are making choices. I still freak out when my car like gives me a beep because I'm coming up on another car, or it's like, oh my God, there's a tree. That, you know, I mean, I'm just like, okay, that's maybe a little over the top car, but but you know, it's like I think about the Prius, when the Prius, and I don't know if Priuses still do this, but like you would put the mode into reverse, but the little doodad would snap into like the middle spot. So you like hit it reverse and then it came back. So it had to use a beep to tell you when you were in reverse. And I was just like, well, you could have just kept the controller in the position as that cue. So it's like, it's interesting how interfaces are evolving in that way.
Yeah, I find myself complaining at my car's interface on a regular basis, but it's, for the most part, it does a good job.
I have a
Do you
question.
have go ahead, Stephen.
I was just going to say, you probably rolled your eyes at the gaffe that Citigroup did with their interface that cost them $500 million. Are there entrenched systems that you can't wait to get your hands on that are so ingrained?
You know, it's been really interesting working in a highly regulated company where like there are massive legal ramifications for choices, right? Citi had Capital One had you know, a breach a little while back, and it's at the same, like I think I've had to learn to remember that like that's just the choice of a radio button is connected to laws and connected to millions or trillions of dollars in fines. And, you know, for designers who join the team, there's a bit of a practicality. Like you are working in a regulated environment now. And designers like constraints for the most part. And so that just has to be part of the constraint system. So yes, there are lots of things I want to dig into. There are so many ways I can see us delivering on our mission to change banking for good. And I mean, what's incredible is to think about the tens of millions of customers that choices actually affect. And just being really, really conscious of how you know, and what the implications are. And like doing some good is still doing some good.
Yeah, I think being able to explain risk to your clients as a designer is paramount. I can't tell you how many times I've had to explain to my clients what the rules are about storing credit card numbers, which basically don't. But you know, so many of them want to and don't understand the amount of risk they're exposing themselves to. But beyond that, I think you know, you can become kind of risk averse as a designer too, right?
You can become risk averse, but the interesting thing is, I mean, the credit business is built on managing risk, not avoiding risk, right? Being thoughtful about where the risk is, how much you're taking on, and how you're going to manage for it. And that is true of any choice you're making in any interactive system. And so I've been helping my team reframe it in that way. We're not about avoidance. We're about designing thoughtfully, right?
So something's going to go wrong at some point. Do you have systems in place to deal with that thing going wrong so that it doesn't spin out of control?
Yeah. I mean, when you think about you're designing an interface, have you thought through what the error scenario might be? Have you tried to design the error scenario out? But knowing that there might still be an error, like what are the consequences of that? How impactful is it? And are you willing to take that risk? Or do you actually have to go back and and create a different solution because that risk is too big. I think it's always good to look through those choices and consider them from that perspective.
Do you have go-to design resources that you would recommend for people who are interested in design? Like I like to go to Nielsen Group because they seem to have, they're very open with sharing a lot of information. But do you have certain places you go on a regular basis?
That is one of them. The other place that I used to go was the Adaptive Path content, which, by the way, is getting put back out on since Capital One bought Adaptive Path. Just some wonderful tool set that'll be back out this year. Fingers crossed. And then, I think that there are the oldie but goodie, like Luke Wroblewski, lukew.com has continued to keep content fresh. I think that more and more, I should also say, I've gotten to this place where I personally don't spend as much time in looking at those resources as my teams. And I tend to spend a lot more time in the industry and reading about what are the expectations of people in whatever vertical it is you're designing for. Not just from a human perspective, but from a language perspective, from what are the competitive conditions perspective, just in order to then translate that context into the interface choices. And more of the industry verticals are spending time talking about experience. So they're thinking, like, learning what the customer base is encountering, or like even just what the sections of a website are, to know like what are the mental models of that vertical, like how do the businesses think about the different groupings. And something I can follow up on, Bob, is I can find out, like, what are some of my design leads going to right now? Like, what are they looking at? I would say it's very, very much the basics, like the interface guidelines, but I'll see if I can dig up some inspiration.
Do you find that even the more advanced designers need to be continually either self-reminding of the basics or being reminded of the basics by others?
Absolutely, yes. at every level, regardless of how long you've been doing it. I mean, there are some people who can just rattle off the rules, but everybody, regardless of whether they're a designer or not, I think gets excited by the problem and excited by solving for it, and then have to like call a timeout and be like, okay, but let's take a step back and make sure we haven't skipped the basics, and that we've laid a really thoughtful foundation on which we're like, creating an exciting new space or function around.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, it seems like in the world of design, no matter what, there are certain principles that are always going to apply, like, correctly defining the problem, correctly defining the people who you're designing for, that they're never going to go away no matter what. They're universal and timeless, would you say?
Absolutely. And I think a lot of people run into the very subjective naget of it, and especially when there's a company that's paying for a job and they're like, well, I get to have an opinion. I get to tell you whether it's good design or not, and that's endlessly it's just part of the job as a designer, is knowing you're going to get opinions, knowing you're going to get questions, and being able to have the fundamental rationale supporting it. So it's not just we wanted to blah, blah, blah. It's like, well, if the goal is to drive a certain action or behavior, then this doodad, this thing, 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 this is the choice, or this structure is the choice. And we believe that's going to do that because of, you know, X, Y, and Z. And then, hey, business partner, if you want to maximize the positive action, this is the way that the design can do that most effectively. If you're willing to, you know, like we could look at yours and we can see how effectively that will work, and that's your choice. But like always kind of building that foundation because of everyone thinking they know how to design. Everybody might know how to design. Can everybody articulate what design is good? Not really. So we can help teach them.
You have to be able to support your design with good language and a clear understanding of the concepts from top to bottom.
Yes, yes. And I think in true consultant fashion and like with humility, like this is the recommendation for these reasons. Yours might be good too. Like,
yeah.
At the end of the day, you're the business leader.
I think that's one of the hardest things about being, you know, a consultant and being a designer is that you have to, you're going to be told that you're wrong sometimes, and you have to be able to honestly assess whether you are or not. Absolutely.
Absolutely. I mean, like, you can be proud of your work, but you can't have an ego attached to it. You know, checking yourself, putting, you know, looking in the mirror and really doing a hard look at, you know, should you go a different direction? And at the end of the day, being able to say, all right, like I've done the best I can, and the product will move forward. And hopefully there will be some learning from it. There will be some, how is it actually behaving in the real world? Where are people encountering problems? As, you know, how do we iterate on this? That is very much a culture that we're building, you know, in a company that has so much been like, how do we just become digital? And it's like the first rev, the minimum viable product, like over and over and over and over for like all the feature space. How do you then make sure, I mean, we got to continue to iterate on it. So are we going back? Are we testing the early assumptions? Have we looked at the traffic patterns through it? Have we looked at people's success? That I think helps in the design moment let go of like the need to like get everything perfect and say, we're going to do the best we can with what we know right now, and we're going to build in some iteration cycles to really learn.
Designing the process of designing itself.
Mm-hmm. Mm-hmm.
Bob, I have a question.
Yes, please.
Hi, Heather.
Hi, Vince.
Hey. So I'm curious to go back to the topic of you know, the thing you brought up a little while back about artificial intelligence and things like that. Just because you know, we use our phones so much, and they become so amazing at, you know, understanding our voice commands, that I'm curious how you're starting to interpret you know, user experience in the light of like, not just, you know, design, like visual design, but user experience also in the light of like, hey, I can interact with it by speaking to it, or pretty soon as humans or machines evolve further and further, like the ability for the machine to understand what you're struggling with, right? And understand that pattern. Like, how does that affect your design thinking? Like, and what, like, I mean, I'm trying to see the crystal ball of what you're seeing in the future. And if you can share some ideas around that and what you're thinking, that would be great. Thank you.
Well, I'm thinking about this kind of in two different ways. One is like the ability to have haptic reaction, like just the little thump that your phone does, or the little vibration. I mean, it's so subtle, but it's such a basic human like response trigger. And so like using sound and motion and touch where appropriate. I like that we have more avenues than we used to, where it was just visual or just oral. I love reading all the, like, I loved like all the like autocorrect when that was still so young, and the best crazy autocorrects. And now look, you know, reading threads on like how Alexa misinterpreted me today. And think, oh, yes. And my Alexa in the hallway just talked to me because I said it. Which, by the way, the first time scared the bejesus out of me because I didn't know my thermostat actually had Alexa in it until I said it one day and my hallway was talking to me. I think that there's just like, there are so many basic patterns in our language, in our thought structure, that have become common, and yet dialects across the country, you have to imagine some behavioral patterns just by learning, you know, using mobile phones or software. People have developed certain personal patterns, and yet some people do some crazy things with them. Even if just you look at like how the Gen Z texts, and you know, I feel like I'm constantly having to keep up on like, well, what emoji am I supposed to use now, and what's that you know, acronym or, you know, shortcut. It's so interesting to think about machines being able to take in all of that information and still make meaning from it. I don't know if folks here have watched AlphaGo, but it's one of the best movies I've watched in a while. And the idea that even with all of that processing power and patterning ability, you don't have to like have the whole complete solution. You just have to have enough to win. Like you just need to have enough of the processing to win. And so I think being really smart about taking in the information and then knowing what is actually going to make a difference for the person in this scenario. Like just having a really high bar and filter for, but what are we doing with it? For the sake of what are we doing all this processing?
Thank you. Thank you.
Yeah, I think there's an element of, you know, I guess you could consider this another design principle, and that's that there's so much that we can do. It doesn't mean that we always should. Mm-hmm. You know, there are, what is it? You know, you always say, you know, just because you can doesn't mean you should, right? And I think that's a good example. I think, you know, we were talking about, you know, personal data security earlier, and I think sometimes personal data might even be collected when it's not even really used or needed. Mm-hmm. You know, it's just available, and so it gets taken and used, and the same thing happens in design. You know, oh look, I can do this really cool thing. I'm going to do it because I want to do it. You know, that's a common mistake that I've seen a lot of developers make, right? And you know, web developers were even worse back in the early days of the web.
Everything needs to blink.
Right. MySpace. Yeah.
I was going to say, to the point of Vince's topic was, you know, it's a generational thing too. So I think like there's kids that are touch first. That was their first interaction, and we're mouse people from the generation. In next generation, it could be people that are voice first, you know, with interacting with computer and technology. I was a Star Trek fan, so I always wanted to be able to have a nice long conversation with a computer, but all our devices now are very structured sentences, and you get it wrong, it's going to go left.
Watching my 4-year-old learning how to talk to Alexa has been hilarious. It's just the funniest thing in the world. And I think that product will be showing signs of real advanced success when it, like a child just learning language can actually communicate with it, right? Because where it's more adaptable, where like it's pieces of the puzzle, but they don't have to necessarily fit together in exactly the right way. She can still get it.
Great.
Yeah, just to speak to Stephen's point, you know, I think it is generational as to whether people will talk to their phones in public or, you know, I mean, I will talk to my computer very comfortably in my office. I don't want anybody to hear me having a conversation with my phone in public, or even a conversation with another person in public, really. I mean, but that's just generational for me. And whereas my daughter will walk down the street yelling into her phone, or, you know, with a headset on without any problem at all. Do you find that you have to plan for that with any of the work that you're doing?
I would say there's always thoughtfulness around how much would people be willing to, like, what would somebody see if they're standing next to a person? You know, how do you, like, if you're talking to a call center agent, now there can be verification in technology ways where you don't have to say your social security number out loud anymore, right? Because that can be overheard. So that definitely comes into play as much as possible. You know, where can we tap into, where can we tap into technology, and where will voice actually possibly be inappropriate or dangerous?
I guess if someone's, you know, when they first log in, their bank balance may be the most important piece of information, but you don't want to display that really large on the screen if it means that it makes it easier for people to read how much money they have in their bank account.
Yeah, well, it's been fascinating in our cafes, where if you haven't been in a Capital One cafe and there's one near you, it's definitely worth, you know, experiencing once you can. But the ambassador, I mean, essentially it was a way of helping to take the customer base into the digital world, right? Having a massive brick and mortar footprint wasn't like cost effective over time. The need to solve people's financial problems through, you know, digital solutions is going to be much more scalable, much more dynamic over time, more personal. And the cafes were a way to help people get adjusted to that. And so you can walk in and, you know, people are surprised when they're like, oh, wait, I can't actually like get a cashier's check. It's like, no, you can get coffee and you can talk to someone who can help show you where you would do that on the app. But our team designed the iPad solutions and the big display solutions in the cafes that the ambassadors use to have conversations and do money coaching with customers. And yet we had to think through, how do we teach an app environment without their personal information? How can we, you know, how comfortable are people going to be letting the, you know, branch ambassador, not necessarily banker, look at their data? And how can they learn the tools and self-serve? And so it was fascinating to see what people were comfortable with and what they were not, and to design like truly the interface and the interaction.
Wow. Yeah, that sounds really interesting. I didn't even know about those. Definitely something I'm going to check out.
Hey, Heather,
well, Heather, go ahead.
One more question. In your design, when you design something that you're really fond of and then it becomes pervasive or you see it a lot, do you ever fall out of love with that design? And
oh my goodness. So I don't know how many of you know this, but on the web, I think like so many companies do this now. If you put in, if you like put some filters on and then you get the little like tabs with the different criteria that start to add up and then you can cross them out. Like that's actually my design. I was the first one to design that for the web. And I have a love-hate relationship with it. I'm equally proud and sorry.
Probably because it's a good idea, but people don't always use it well.
It's true. It gets implemented in bad ways, and people don't necessarily know what it's doing. Yeah.
It's
and
got
that's
to be implementation.
a lot of times.
Yeah.
But I mean that.
Can't be us.
that's one of my favorite parts about being a designer, though, is when you design something and then the users use it in a way you never would have expected. And you're just like, oh, well, okay, didn't expect that. And sometimes it's good and sometimes it's bad. But it's been fun. It's been fun to see things. I mean, the other thing that was actually my patent from back to the Adobe days is the little thumbnail scrubber. When you scroll through an app and it gives you a little thumbnail preview. And it's been what I just wish I got royalties, you know, like.
Wow, yeah. That's widely used, to say the least. Well, Heather Winkle, you've been very generous with your time, and it's been wonderful catching up with you. I'm really happy we were able to do this, and thank you so much for being here. Really, really appreciate it.
Thank you so much for having me. It's been wonderful to hear your questions, and I'm so curious. I was like, I could spend another hour just hearing like what's going on with you now. How's the product space evolved? What are the challenges you're seeing with your customers? Like, I want to ask you all those questions. And so, you know, someday feel free to ping me and we can have a follow-up.
It sounds great. Well, Heather, thank you again, and have a wonderful rest of your day. And to the rest of you, we'll see you all next month.
Great. Thank you so much.
Bye.
Thank you, Heather.
Thanks, Bob. Bye, everyone.
What's in your wallet?
How long were you holding on to that?
Christian wanted to know if they use FileMaker at Capital One.
I will tell you only in the pocket that Matt Odell and I have started it.
Oh, cool. Nice. Thanks, Christian, as well for your presentation.
You had to
Thank
fight
you.
to get the licenses too, didn't you?